Hello and welcome to Central Coast Newspaper's Video News. I'm Jackie Pearson and today I'm joined by the member for Dobell, the federal member for Dobell, Emma McBride. Welcome, Emma.
Thank you, Jackie. It's great to be here today.
Sparing some time, I know you're very busy. Rumours about a federal election later in the year. You've been the member for Dobell for almost 2 years now.
Mm-hmm.
What's it been like? Is it your dream job?
We've hit the ground running. In terms of being a dream job, as someone who grew up in Wyong and went to high school locally in Tuggerah, and I was at a school this morning and presenting their SRC badges, and when you think, I was once that kid in that classroom, and now I get the chance on behalf of our community to stand up and speak out about issues. And in my first 18 months, one of the biggest issues was around the privatisation of Wyong Hospital. And it wasn't something that I anticipated. And I'd worked there as a pharmacist for almost 10 years.
Yes.
And before I'd made my first speech, there was a massive issue in our local community that meant something to me personally. So that's really shaped been how I've started in this job.
It was a bit of a catapult.
It was, and it wasn't, I think it was a surprise to everybody. And everybody now is relieved that the state government reversed their position. But it really was, for me, that was how I started in this job.
So you've got a big and diverse and growing electorate. What are the key issues, do you think, federal issues for your constituents?
Locally, what people mostly talk to me about is the NBN. That's been in terms of the rollout, people were really optimistic about what the NBN might mean for our community, how it could transform the coast in terms of jobs, business, and I think what people have seen is that it's just not delivered, and people are personally very frustrated at what they thought could be something that could really change our community and has fallen short. The other one is around Centrelink. I have lots of people coming to me about, in really tough circumstances, who found themselves needing support and just not getting the support they need. We've also seen a lot with NDIS. Again, the NDIS was something that everybody believes is a good idea, but how it's been rolled out has left a lot of people feeling vulnerable and feeling that they, have now got a new bureaucracy to deal with rather than an agency that's helping to support them to meet their needs.
It seems to me that with each of those examples, we've gone back to a buyer beware situation where the intent is good, but the delivery of services and the underpinning care and responsibility doesn't seem to be there. It's the vulnerable that seem to be having the most difficulty navigating those new marketplaces, and they feel more like marketplaces than new services. Is that something that you feel?
Yes. I want to live in a society. I want to be part of a community where people feel they belong, and when people need support, that they have it, that it's wrapped around. A lot of people, their experience is that they get pushed to an online portal like My Aged Care, where there is this gap between them and what they need and the service being provided. And I think what we really need is empathy and compassion. All it takes is someone losing a job, a relationship breaking down, a business failing for you or I to be in that same situation. And I think there's this at the moment, and the individuals working within the agencies, I believe, are all well-intentioned. The way the agencies are coordinated and the way that they're resourced means that they can't meet the growing needs in our community. And daily, I have people speaking to me, and their circumstances are heartbreaking, and we work with them as best we can, but it's a systematic problem. And it's not a local problem.
So is it a funding issue? Is it the fact that these programs have been implemented without the level of funding that they require to be implemented properly, or is there something else going on here?
I think funding does matter, and in some instances, say with the NDIS, it's commonly said that it wasn't adequately funded. It was. it's now about the current government's priorities and where they're directing resources. So part of it is funding. Part of it is also how things are coordinated. And in my personal experience, having to deal with agencies on behalf of my mum and my dad, there's some things that as a daughter, that you would like to see otherwise. Particularly, whether they could do practical things like streamline paperwork, so you're not having to have the same conversation with multiple people about circumstances that haven't and won't improve. Mm-hmm. So I think part of it is resourcing and part of it's how it's coordinated, and both can be improved.
So what do you do about the funding? We currently have a federal government that is looking at a reduced corporate tax rate. How do you, without going into debt, get the revenue necessary to properly fund federal programs?
Mm-hmm. Well, you've raised that $65 billion tax cut, and we know that trickle-down economics doesn't work, that by cutting tax to the big end of town, we are not going to see people locally benefit from it. Governments do have to generate revenue, and there are other means that they can do that. Ultimately, it's about priorities and where the revenue that they do have, where they direct it. And I think in this government, you can clearly see by their decisions, by where they allocate money, where their priorities are. And as a local MP, I'm working as hard as I can to draw attention to this, to make representations on behalf of people, and work towards a change in government where we see a complete shift in what the priorities are.
So with My Aged Care, which I know you've spoken out about recently, and the deficit in delivery of home care, how did that happen? How did we get to a 100,000 waiting list for in-home care? How can that possibly, how can there not be red flags months before we get to that?
You're right. It beggars belief to think that there's over 950 families locally that are in this situation where they're on waiting lists that are longer than 12 months. And of those, a very large proportion, about a third, are people needing level 4 high needs packages. And for those people, they don't have 12 months to wait. No. Someone that I spoke out about, Joan, her daughter Jane, contacted us. She was 91, had a trip to hospital, recuperated her daughter's place, and then was ready to be able to be home with the right support around her. And there was a 12-month delay. Then when she was provided support, she was assessed as requiring level 4, but was registered through Medicare at level 2, leaving significant out-of-pocket expenses, over $2,700 a month.
Which is a lot of money
it's a lot of money.
Many households in Dobell.
It is. Well, when you look at the profile of our community, there's lots of pockets of our community that are really struggling. And in those circumstances, they're families that we should better support. We shouldn't be leaving them under financial strain on top of their responsibilities as a carer. It's just too much for people.
Okay. You've also, Dobell is on the urban edge, I suppose, and still has a lot of beautiful bush. And you, in your time as local member, have made several referrals under the EPBC Act. How important is it to manage, how important do you think it is to constituents to manage issues like environmental preservation and border security?
It's what makes the Central Coast the place that we love to live in. That you can be, you can go to the beach, that you can, that you can walk in the national parks. That it is what is unique. It's our identity as a region, and I think that's what really matters to people. The number of school students that have written to me about single-use plastic bags because they see the lake and they see the direct effect that it has. So I think these type of issues are ones that really matter on the Central Coast because they go to our identity as a region and how we feel about where we live. So I think that's critical. To go to water security, when I was on council, the biggest infrastructure project, was the Marty to Mangrove pipeline, $120 million project, $80 million from the former Labor federal government. Less than 10 years later, we're now looking at a proposal for a mine that would jeopardise that water catchment and that water security. So it just does not make sense. And universally in the community, people are opposed to it. Central Coast Council is opposed to it. The state opposition is opposed to it. The state Liberal government were opposed to it. And this is the part that I think really gets people, that they were told that there would be no ifs, no buts, that Wallara 2 would not go ahead under the former Liberal Premier Barry O'Farrell. Now the PAC's given it the green light and it's sitting before the State Environment Minister. And I hear that it's something that they're keen to support, which is the exact opposite of what everybody in the community wants.
And so within the great halls of Parliament House, do you bump into Josh Frydenberg and, you know, get the chance to say, excuse me, Josh, but it'd be really good if you could stop this thing, or is it a bit more formal than that?
You can have you can bump into people and have corridor conversations, and there's been good examples of that where I've had a chance to meet with the then Minister for Veterans Affairs about an issue that the Men's Shed raised with me about veterans' welfare. So there are those opportunities. But yes, you're right, there is a formal process, and it's something that I am doing everything that I can to be able to stand up for our community and speak out. I spoke in Parliament about this last week.
Seriously, that's what I'm interested in. As the member for Dobell, what avenues are available to you to feed into the EPBC process? Because it looks to me like what they're going to do is get the same documentation that the New South Wales PAC relied on and basically take PAC's word for it, which we saw to some extent with the Kangangi rail maintenance facility. So as the local member, what power, is available?
Well, I think importantly, under the former Labor government, the EPBC Act was amended to include the water trigger.
Yep.
So this must be referred to the federal minister under the water trigger. So I know that it's sitting before Josh Frydenberg, and the minister will be the one who will ultimately decide. So I am doing everything I can to continue to apply pressure. There's action through the Land and Environment Court, which there has been previously. There's action in the New South Wales Upper House around the Wyong Special Protection, which refers to our water catchment. So there's different avenues that we can where we can continue to apply pressure. And what I would encourage people to do this week is to, I know that this is going through the New South Wales Upper House, is to, email, Facebook message, put their views on the record so that it's very clear to the New South Wales Liberal government and to the national coalition that this is not something that's in the interest of our community.
Okay. It's almost International Women's Day. How's the journey been for you? We can talk both about local government and federal government as a young woman in those environments. We know about Harvey Weinstein.
Yes.
How is it as a female politician in 2018?
It's been, my training was as a pharmacist, and I worked at Wyong Hospital for 10 years, and mostly in mental health. And in the health sector, women are very well respected, and they're often in positions of leadership. As I was the deputy director of the pharmacy department, so it's very. And then I've switched into politics, and it's a stark contrast where you look at the representation of women, and I know the Labor Party in the mid-90s set a target, and we're steadily working towards that, and we're meeting those. But I think it is definitely a very combative environment, and it's one that I think, doesn't necessarily reflect how our community would like us to be able to represent them. The number of people that tell me they point to the telly and say, don't behave like that, because I don't think people think it reflects them or how they want people in their community to act on their behalf. So, and I think...
So you call the behaviour?
Oh, I've definitely, seen where behaviour that I think, crosses the line. And I don't think it's in the interest of our community. And some of the things that we've seen recently, particularly suggesting, young women working in politics and, and slurring them, that's not okay. And
now we have a very cohesive local land council in your and Darkingen are one of the biggest landholders in your electorate. And we have a male-dominated cabinet that has decided to not adhere to the recommendations from the Uluru Statement from the Heart. Now I think we have the Prime Minister and the opposition leader talking about the wording of the referendum. How do you feel about truth and treaty and the things that came back to Cabinet, and then that very white male-dominated decision about it?
Yeah. We've just marked 10 years since the apology, and to me, to think in that 10 years that we have gone backwards. And particularly as someone who has worked in health, what I'm really concerned about is closing those gaps. And we won't close those gaps on health and wellbeing. I know there's one target that we're almost reaching, which is around school participation, but on all of those others, when we're not meeting them, and in some of them we're going backwards. So, and I think unless there is genuine recognition that is community-led, that's led by our Indigenous people, then we won't see that healing in our society. So I think fundamentally that has to be recognised, and it's really disappointing to see that 10 years on from the apology that we're no closer, and that the Prime Minister and others made statements following Uluru, but then have acted in a way that's essentially walking away from it. And I think it has to change.
So Emma, you're young and full of vitality. Are you going to contest Dobell, first of all? Does your party allow the incumbent to be pre-selected? How does that work?
Yes, definitely. So I've been pre-selected, so I will be contesting the next election, and I'm really looking forward to, continuing in this job and doing what I can on behalf of our community. And sometimes I do have to stop and think about it, particularly when I'm in schools like I was today, and think, not that long ago, I was that kid sitting in that classroom that, cared about our community and wanted to get involved and hopefully make a difference. And now I get that chance. So
Future Minister for Health?
I definitely want to continue my interest in health, and public health is a particular passion of mine. And when you see the differences in health and wellbeing between communities, it's something that we must do something about. When you see some of the statistics around our community, whether it's about the prevalence of diabetes or whether it's about mental health and wellbeing, on a lot of these league tables, we're sitting on the wrong side of them. So I would definitely continue or work as hard as I can to make sure that going into the next election that Labor's got really strong policies around health and wellbeing.
So is the public health system, Labor copped it a bit over Mediscare, is the public health system under threat? Are the implementation of My Aged Care and NDIS examples of how we're slowly sort of creeping towards a more American, more privatised system, and what can be done to stop that creep?
I think that one of the reasons that I'm part of the Labor Party is that the Labor Party did design and introduce Medicare, and also the PBS, which means that people can have affordable medicines when they need them. So I think fundamentally the underlying principles are solid, but I agree with you, the way that the current government is underfunding and undermining, it really can put it at risk. And I know that locally we've got some really strong state Labor members, David Harris, David Meehan, Lisa Tetch, Yasmin Catley, who are together working. They fought off the privatisation of Wyong Hospital, and they're making sure that at a local level we get the right services in the right places. What I want to do working with them as a federal member is make sure that the things that underpin it, Medicare, the PBS, NDIS, are properly funded, are given the resources that they need to do what they intended to do, which is to provide patient-centred care. So people have options, and people are able to make those decisions in the interests of themselves or those that are caring for them.
Emma McBride, thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been lovely to be here.